opportunity to thank you very much. We are really impressed that the media responded to our request to brief you. I hope you will clear part of the impression that is being given to the country that sugar cartels are going to buy these. A commission is a duly constituted commission and will not allow that kind of thing. By the way, the cartels normally work on imported sugar. They don't work on the millers here. So I would like you to help us also to tell the country that this is what is being done and that we want to improve the sugar industry in this country. And we're also doing it with other stakeholders, including the Ministry of Agriculture, where the portfolio of the issue of sugar falls. So thank you very much and have a good day.
That being the Privatization Commission. Let's get some more news now and cross over back to Parliament that resumed sittings this morning. Listen.
Having several lanes, the mainstream and then two carriage service lanes. And you still find all our matatus and all our drivers messing up the road until there is such a snarl that you are wondering, even if we created this road, will we use it correctly? So I emphasize the software part of the amendment of our own attitudes and the use of our roads. Having said that, I would like to remind the nation of Kenya, represented by these men and women who are sitting here, that we have seen the kind of brutality that is uncalled for. We have seen malicious attempts by people in authority to use that authority to subverse the rights of others. As a woman, I want to call upon all the other women in this house, whether you are coming from NASA or Jubilee. I think we are going the wrong direction when we see men who are armed, harassing women who are innocent, some of them being removed from their own houses to be beaten up. I think this is unacceptable, and I would want to condemn it in the strongest terms possible. As we think about the future of our country, it is important to address where we are now. This uncertainty that we think is over, it is not over. We cannot be laughing when a section of this same nation is crying and people are denied their rights. So I think this House needs to rise up to its rightful occasion and position that we should be talking right when it is right and wrong when it is wrong. I want to also, in the name of going back to doing what is right, including doing our roads right. I had my brother saying that if we are amending the motion to include the rurals, then we are wrong. We will lose the spirit. But having come from the rural, I want to tell you, there are some roads in those rurals that even two vehicles cannot bypass each other. And therefore, if we are thinking about the road network in Kenya, then rural the carer must be brought to book. And everywhere in the nation where any money is spent to build a road, it is important that we know there is a possibility of somebody overtaking, a possibility of a vehicle coming from the other end. Like in Migori County where I come, I think we have lost quite a number of young people in the name of Boda Boda. They have been maimed, they have been made to be disabled, some have died because the roads are too narrow. There is no way these big machines like around the Sugar Belt region, Sony, we have had quite a number of cases of people dying out of them. And I would want us, as we discuss, to also commend that in future we can come up with a template and something that is all-inclusive to give a disciplinary measure, and more so, the people who exercise authority on these roads, we need to make them know that we are tired of police just standing on the road to collect some money from the drivers and then the same thing repeated and repeated and repeated. This is something that needs a total concerted effort of all members just to make sure that it is rightfully done. So I support this idea, but also adding my voice to the cry that we need from this House to go back to the rule of the law and protect the rights of everybody. The right to life, the right to self-expression, the right to self-assembly, and all those ideas that are included in our Constitution. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir.
We shall now have the Honorable Murgor Kipkoskei, member for Kayos North. Members, I would like you to note that even as we give opportunity to members to speak, we shall try to, as much as possible, to be fair to regional balance, gender balance, and all this. So we have opportunity, all of us, to speak. The list is here. I will try to balance that as much as possible. So this is the only motion we have today. I would ask members to kindly be patient. We shall give these opportunities as fairly and as distribute them across the country as much as possible. The Honorable Murgor, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to put my voice into this very important, which actually I think is long overdue, this motion on service lanes, emergency service lanes. And I would like also to thank Honorable Melly for bringing this motion. Mr. Speaker, I have the experience of two cities or two towns, basically Nairobi and probably Eldoret, my hometown. And what we see, particularly when there is a snarl up, we have ambulances really, trying to find a way of getting to the hospitals. And I wonder sometimes, because if a patient is in that ambulance and is bleeding, or has had a heart attack, for example, sometimes I wonder myself, will this person really reach there? So I think this motion has come at the right time, and I think we should actually expedite such that this motion is put in place as soon as possible. Police also, and fire trucks, you find buildings going completely burnt because the ambulances cannot reach the areas as soon as is required. The only thing, Mr. Speaker, which I think this motion will face, one basically is the question of implementation. And let's not cheat ourselves. We have had many and have up to now not been implemented. And I think I would urge Honorable Melly to bring a bill actually so that this thing is brought to fruition. Now, quoting Honorable Wamalwa, the question of discipline. And I see the challenge which this motion is going, if it is implemented, is the question of really, are we disciplined enough? Matatu, we use the same lane. Somebody talked about CSS, putting up sirens and go. I'm sure, and also probably some of the MPs here may start using those lanes, and it will be really unfair to use it because it is not what it was meant for. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to end up there. I support this motion with all the amendments which have been made. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, Dr. Murgor. I will give this.
All right, so that is Parliament resuming debate. They're talking about a motion on emergency service lanes, but you did hear even through some of the previous speakers, people quite eager to jump in and talk about the political environment in the country, and the speaker saying that there will be a time for that. So in the closing moments of the program, I'm still with my guests in studio. It does appear, even by watching Parliament go, after resuming its sittings, going straight into a motion, there is on the one hand a very clear push to get back to work. Things must go on, and there may be truth to that, but a lot of people are still unhappy, unsettled, and there can be a misinterpretation of the lack of daily protests, etc., to mean acceptance of what has happened and to mean that people are moving on. What should be important now, Joy, for, or rather, let me start with you, Java. So what should be important now for the administration that has been sworn in terms of, drawing that distinction? The fact that there aren't daily protests on the streets, as we saw previously, does not necessarily equal acceptance or the end of the matter.
Well, first, it would be to start by asking ourselves, or the administration to ask itself, why are the people protesting? And what is it that can be done to assuage the kind of anger, frustration they could be having that led them to the streets? If it's a question of a commitment to electoral reform, what could be the immediate baby steps that could be taken collectively with other leaders so that in 2022 elections, we do not get to experience yet again that which we are facing today? And it should be squarely on the president and the deputy president to be the better angels and custodians of our national values. Actually, if you just reflect on those values of our nation, speaking also to the rule of law that the president tapped into in his inaugural address, then some of these things actually we may avoid them, or we may deal with them or tackle them. And that is why maybe reflecting a bit on what Robert Kennedy said, quoting the Greeks in one of his remarks, saying the necessity of taming the savageness of man to create a gentle life in this world. If we just look at it that way, what is this political savageness that we're facing in the country today? How can it be tamed to the extent of creating a gentle life for Kenyans? That is what we need to look at right now, because development only takes place in an atmosphere, yes, as it's been said, of matters justice, etc., the progressiveness that should be self-evident. And the president, yes, spoke to matters also of the separation of powers. And these ideals of separation of powers of the institutions of the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature are things that have been on earth for a very long time, from the days when it was propounded by Baron de Montesquieu. We want to see that, are we going to have this administration actually support that independence of all these arms doing their own work, so that if it's a question of the reforms that we need, whether it's at the judiciary level or the legislation, that actually we are seeing them being driven for the greater good of the nation. And
not for partisan political mileage.
Exactly.
Right.
But we're going also to see partisanship play out on the floor of the assemblies at the national level, at the county level. This partisanship also should be tamed by the good conscience of the leaders themselves, and they appeal to universalism in terms of approaching, whether it's development, progress, inclusivity. If we embrace universalism, then I think we'll be making that small step in the right direction.
All right, Joy, an end to daily protests and an end to the electoral process as envisaged in the Constitution does not necessarily mean an end to the matter politically. What must the administration do now?
Like we're saying during the break, if the opposition does nothing towards national cohesion, that is their loss, so to speak. But for the national government, national cohesion must be a priority. And the fact that you've got people who are actually, even today, if there is a call, that there are people who will answer the call, it means that there is a conversation that must be had. What Java said earlier, there are some difficult things that must be done, and we need, as a society, to appreciate the fact that if people are saying something repeatedly, maybe they have a point, and it is only beneficial to us as a people to not only listen to our brothers, but to try and understand where are they coming from. Now, yesterday, when you listen to the Deputy President's speech, there's a bit where he sort of touched on a little bit on it, and he said, look, we cannot have justice if we do not have an adherence to the rule of law. That's a place to start. Say, look, we are looking for justice, there's a quest for justice, okay, fine. But how do we achieve this justice? And let us use the law or the legal means to try and achieve this. But over and above that, as Javas has correctly pointed out, there are channels, changing the law, using parliament, having conversations that are talking to historical injustices that will help us to understand as a people, are we making progress or not? That having been said, also on the side of the opposition, where there is no point, let us not flog a dead horse. Because there are times also you can insist on something and then somebody, let me use the example of when Dr. Ekuru Aukot got this decision that said that there was no sufficient participation when they were doing the procurement. And then Chebukati calls the forum and says, okay, fine, we are sitting, give us your contributions towards what we're going. And people came, and what they're presenting had nothing to do with the procurement of the ballot papers. There are times you can say something and we imagine you have a point. Then when you sit down, you realize, by the way, maybe there's nothing there. Let us also be intellectually honest as we are having this discourse. Let's not make noise for the sake of making noise. Let everything be strategic towards moving the country forward. Even the activities, let them have an end in mind. Because otherwise, we'll keep people in this pressure cooker situation. And at the end of the day, by the time it dissipates, will the country be better off for it? Will it be worse off for it? Those are the questions our leaders need to be asking themselves. At everything we do, let us leave Kenya better for it rather than worse for it. So there is room. The government must take the lead, but the opposition also has to engage constructively to move Kenya forward. And
I think the legacy question is not just about President Kenyatta, it is equally very much about the NASA leader.
Exactly.
So I'll come to you both for closing comments, but we can recap an earlier report we heard in this hour from the Privatization Commission. They were talking about the privatization of 5 previously state-owned sugar millers, and part of their plea was a turnaround from the perception that, you know, sugar barons are the ones who, or rather sugar cartels are the ones who will benefit from this move to privatize these state-owned millers. Our Dennis Otieno is on the ground and he joins us now with an update. Dennis, good morning. First, start by giving us the global picture of what the Commission had to say today in reference to these 5 millers.
Very good morning to you, Kiguta, in studio. Yes, the Privatization Commission has finally given us an update of the plans that it is having with regard to privatizing 5 state-owned sugar millers in the country. And just to give us a brief of what they are discussed, I have the pleasure of the officials here. I think I'll start with the chairman, just to give us a brief of what they have agreed on with regard to the privatization of these 5 state-owned sugar millers. Remember that this is a process that has been happening since the year 2015, but it has actually come across many legal hurdles, and of course even the county governments, some of the county governments involved were actually not comfortable with some of the conditions that had been put. So here with me is the chairman. We'll just get a brief of what they've agreed on with regard to today's briefing. So, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Kindly tell us in a nutshell, with the privatization of these 5 state sugar millers, where are we and how fast will this process move?
Thank you. In a nutshell, the process had proceeded on until the end of 2015 to privatize 5 sugar state-owned millers, but was stopped by the court process. And this was from the Council of Governors. Now this process through the court has now been released. The court directed that we do consultations with the Council of Governors and then proceed to privatize these sugar mills. Therefore, as a commission, since we had moved to the point of expression of interest, we intend to do exhaustive negotiations with the governors, particularly where the sugar millers are, and then with the Intergovernmental Relations Technical Council, who will give us, and IBEC, who will give us a go-ahead to do this. This is basically where we are, and we intend, if we do this very soon, to privatize these sugar mills quite fast. I know the interest we have to privatize this, to improve their production and improve the cane production is also the same interest the governors have in those areas. So I'm sure we are going to agree on the way forward as to how to do it.
Lastly, kindly just name the 5 sugar companies that you're privatizing.
Yes, the 5 state-owned sugar mills are Sony, that is the South Nyanza Sugar Company. Then 3 in Kisumu, Nandi and Miwani. That is, in Nandi and Kericho. That is Miwani, Chemelil, Moroni, and then in Bungoma there is Nzoia Sugar Factory. So there are 5.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And Kiguta, you might be wondering when they're talking of privatizing these companies, you might be wondering who is the investor that they're actually targeting. Kindly, let's just hear from the acting CEO, just to tell us briefly who are they looking at when it comes to taking over of these 5 state-owned millers. Thank you very much for joining us. Kindly just tell us your name.
Thank you. My name is Jacqueline Muindi, the Acting Executive Director and CEO, Privatization Commission.
So who are you looking at in terms of an investor? What should be their credentials?
Top on the list is that they must show evidence that they have run sugar mills with a track record of 10 years in the industry, and also 5 of those years should show that the mills have been run profitably, so that the same competencies can be replicated in the 5 state-owned sugar companies in Kenya. Okay. Yes. All right.
Thank you very much, Madam Muinde. Now, Kiguta, there you have it. I know we are running out of time, but the reason as to why all this is happening is that our sugar sector is actually in a sorry state at the moment. We've had the sugar millers really struggling. Most of them don't even have capacity, and we've been having so many challenges when it comes to our sugar sector. We'll be keeping tabs on this story, and we'll just keep our viewers updated on the other briefings that we will get from the Commission right here at LICO. Kiguta, back to you in studio.
Thanks very much. That's our Dennis Otieno reporting for us this morning. Thank you, Dennis. And we're in the closing moments of Citizen Extra this morning, and I want to thank all my guests who've been with us. Lillian Mahiri-Zaja, who's a former IEBC chair. She had to leave us a little earlier on, but she was speaking to us earlier today. Joy Mudivo and Javas Bigambo still with us. Your final thoughts on moving Kenya forward? And I leave it as broad as that because, moving it forward is not saying don't deal with the hard issues which you talked about, or redressing any injustices that people think took place, but there must be motion forward one way or the other. How do we go about that, Joy?
One thing I would want to see is for Kenyans themselves to take responsibility for what is happening in the country. For a long time, we have let the politicians set the pace. We've let them dictate where we go. We hear people talking like we're waiting to be told what to do and then we do it. I wish people would come to a place where let us set the agenda. Let's demand more of our leaders, more accountability. Let us also, in terms of participating in, for example, legislation at the county level, at the national level, because if you are invested in the process, then you own the outcome. But if we keep, as Kenyans, waiting for things to happen to us, we waited for government to do this to us, and they did not do it, then we always get disillusioned and we get discouraged. That is one. Secondly, I want for our politicians to also mature in their politics, to learn, like President Museveni said yesterday, there's a time for everything and there's a purpose for everything under heaven. When it's time to go hard in politics, let's go hard in politics. When it's time to concentrate on development, to do nation building, let us also be nationalists as politicians and leaders, and be the leaders in moving Kenya forward rather than being the impediment to Kenya moving forward. Because at the end of the day, we are all in this together. And if it sinks with all of us. So it behoves us as Kenyans to demand more of our leaders, and as the political leaders to offer more to the people in terms of not more of our ambition, but more of actually offering guidance and direction that takes us forward rather than keeps us trapped in the past.
Javas.
Well, the politics of identity inclusivity and belonging are very, very essential in taking Kenya forward. And the president needs to bring himself to that realization and his team that there are those individuals who feel less of belonging to that essential part of patriotism and nationalism that constitutes the body politic of Kenyanness. And the task of building a nation is not an easy one. And President Kenyatta and his able team should not ask for lighter burdens. They should have, try to ask the Almighty, the creator of heaven and earth, for stronger backs and wider shoulders to carry this nation to the next level. And also see how, for the sake of brotherhood and those brackets of moving together, all of us reaching out to all leaders and every part of the country for that greater good. He said in his speech that he has made close to 700 trips around the country campaigning. It would be important for him to make even more than 700 trips, perhaps double that number after this election, to reach out to every part of Kenya. It will be very, very important, because he does that, then he will be that leader that this country will always look up to, because that's what we need this moment more than any other. History will always have a place for him if he makes every person in this country believe that we belong. The other thing is accountability. Right now, you realize that there is a report of the Auditor General that came out closing the year June 2016 that indicated even the Ministry of Devolution cannot account for 1 billion shillings. And then the other Auditor General reports on county government's lack of accountability. It is important for us, one, as we stress on matters of accountability, also heightening our sense of frugality and expending taxpayers' money sparingly, because we must not spend as though the world is ending on December 31st. We need Kenya that moves forward.
Thank you both so much for your views, and that's my time on Citizen Extra. Brian Okoth will be coming up shortly. He's got what's breaking the internet, but for now we are taking a short break and we're back with more.